The domino setup in V For Vendetta is one of the best domino setups to ever appear in a movie, in my opinion. It looks like it was made by actual professional domino builders, and it uses very familiar building techniques. As the setup represents smaller actions leading to bigger actions, which is totally not an overused domino trope, the project itself uses color-changing dominoes, and some of the black dominoes change to red as they fall to reveal V's insignia. I've recently totally been into analyzing famous setups like these, and this would definitely be a moment for me to remake this setup as I talk about what the movie did versus what I would do. But I've been spared the work as another builder has already remade this setup not once, but twice. So here to talk with me today about this project is WDomino.
Hello there.
So, walk us through your build process. How long did this project take? How many dominoes did you use? How did you pull this off?
So the first time I was building it, I was just representing the whole insignia, and I just laid the dominoes flat on the floor. I just did it with my head, and I approached it the same way as they did with the movie scene. So the V insignia falls towards the camera, with the black sides going from left to right away from the V, so it matched all the direction the domino were toppling to. I first set up this project in 5,000 dominoes, which was with the maximum amount of red dominoes I had at the time, and I did the red part with normal standing dominoes and the black part in horizontal dominoes to have a sort of 3D effect that the whole V insignia was standing out more.
That's definitely an efficient way to build a project like this. So then, how close do you think your remake is to the original? Were there parts you chose to change?
I think it's like a 70% match because I use horizontals instead of the standing dominoes, and it's of course much smaller, but in terms of the way it was shot and the directions the dominoes were falling, it's a 100% match.
Yeah, I really appreciate the accuracy. And since you built this project twice, what were the most significant design differences? Was there one design you preferred over the other?
Yeah, so I made a huge mistake because I wanted to approach it the same way as the movie did, with like a black background with some lighting, but I made a mistake. I couldn't edit that out. I decided to remake it a year later on the 5th of November again, this time with all the lights I had, and I approached it with all horizontally. Not only is it like the way I build the most, or I would love to build horizontal the most of the time, but it also captures the domino in a much slower way than you would with the normal standing domino. So I didn't have to record it in slow motion to capture like the same aura, because the original domino scene is also shot in slow motion, not in real time.
Yes, I think including horizontal dominoes in both builds was a really smart decision. It also prevents the black dominoes from falling into any red dominoes that haven't fallen yet. And it's very clear to see how you split into other sections of the field rather than just seeing the colors of the dominoes change, like in the movie. Now, I do understand you have some extra knowledge about how they made the original setup from the movie. Any fun facts or opinions you would like to share?
Well, like I said, I was analyzing the project myself because I wanted to match it almost like 100% the same way. And I happened to know that it was in fact made by Domino Day builders at the time. The movie was released in 2005, and in the beginning of 2005 there were like 4 Domino Day builders. They were hired to do this job, to make a project of 22,000 dominoes, which they also used some color changing to make the V insignia stand a little bit more, because if it appears first with black tops, although you can see the V insignia already, the moment when it topples, it is captured on camera where it's like standing out because the light is shot from above. So you don't see the color of the dominoes, in this case only red, until it topples. And that captures that metaphor also very good, because it's about the domino reaction that the character V has created in the movie at a point that it's not longer just him, because he has done some events in order to change things. But at a certain point, the crowd that was following took it over, so he didn't have to do all it himself. And that is the metaphor they use in this V insignia, because it's like from one domino that topples, that spreads into probably 300 dominoes at the same time, each row going outwards. So the reason it wasn't an SOS field, because the technique wasn't invented back then. The first ever SOS technique that was ever used was actually the Betty Boop project from Domino Day 2006. So it actually has to be named the Betty Boop technique, but it became more known and more easy to name because the Domino Day 2007 actually showed a field where it would spell out SOS. Back then the technique wasn't invented yet, and I think if it would have, they wouldn't have used it, because it wouldn't show that same metaphor they wanted to show in the movie, because it was not about showing the V insignia, it's about the domino reaction metaphor, and they captured that very well. And I also happen to know that the entire project was shot once, but the shots you see at the beginning, at the moment of toppling, and when the V character takes the last domino out of the field, that has been shot several times to just have it a perfect match. Because the last domino you see that is standing on the ground was actually taped on the ground to not have a impression that the domino was falling to one side or left or right. Plus, I happen to know that the character that actually topples and picks up the domino isn't actually the actor Hugo Weaving, which is behind the mask. Which also happens to be because he wears a mask, you don't see anyway who's behind it. But it was actually Mr. Domino himself that topples and picked up the domino.
Well, I think those are amazing insights. Thank you so much. The amount of knowledge you have on these things is honestly insane, and I'm really happy you're here to share it. Now, I want to dive a little deeper into two things WDomino mentioned, the type of field used and the color changing dominoes. The V For Vendetta domino setup is a free-handed field. This is one of the three very general classifications for domino fields, which seem to be fields of all traditional uniform shapes, like rectangles, crossovers, circles, triangles, etc., free-handed fields, which take the shape of the images they depict, and SOS fields, which involve actually taping dominoes down so the field falls section by section. The easiest way to make the V would have been as a rectangle, as is with all domino fields. However, V's insignia mostly fits into the shape of a circle, so it would have been awkward to fit it into a rectangular field and fill the corners with some other color. And the field isn't an SOS field either, even though it has the distinct sections for it, because as WDomino mentioned, SOS fields were not invented until the following year. But even then, as a domino setup for a dramatic scene of a movie, SOS fields don't always provide the most dramatic falldowns, with only small sections of the field toppling at a time. It would also not have been the easiest thing to follow with all of the low shots of this setup, which is why I think it really works that the V was made as a free-handed field. Additionally, it was a smart choice to start the field from a point where all the lines could logically meet and topple outward. Now, what really makes the original setup stand out to me is the color changing dominoes. This is such a cool effect to actually make it onto the big screen. A little bit about color changing dominoes. The domino itself is the color you want it to be before the topple, with the backside painted or taped the color you want it to be after the topple. This is because the color of the top of the domino is the most prominent color seen before the fall down, and the color of the back of the domino is the most prominent color seen after. The angle that you film color changing dominoes is important too, otherwise you may end up with extra colors in your shot. If you film from too far behind the field, you can sometimes see the back of the dominoes before they fall. Likewise, if you film too far in front of the field, you can see the top of the dominoes after they fall. For this reason, it's best to film color changing dominoes from a wide, top-down angle, which WDomino mentioned, and which, thankfully, this movie knew to include shots of. I want to end this video with one more bit of trivia about the last domino in the setup, the one that doesn't fall, because that domino is a color changing domino too. And when V picks the domino up, you can see that the side facing into his glove is red and the side facing out of his glove is black. That means when it was in the setup, it's black on the left side and red on the right side. So while there is symbolism in the movie about the domino not falling, it was set up to fall to the left. Thanks so much for watching. I highly recommend subscribing to WDomino, who is another amazing domino artist and member of our community. And if you're interested in chain reaction analysis essays, I've made a couple more of those too. I'm Flash Domino, and thank you for supporting chain reaction art.